Empires. They rise, they fall, they leave behind these legacies that echo through time. And today we're taking a deep dive into one that, well, you can't really talk about empires without talking about the Roman Empire, can you?
No, you can't. Not really, no.
We're going to be sifting through some really insightful academic excerpts to try and uncover the inner workings of this ancient superpower.
Okay.
So buckle up, because we're going to explore, well, I mean, everything. The structure of Roman society, reach of their military, the economic forces that drove their success, and the cultural shifts that reshaped their world.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. The Roman Empire, the sheer scale of it. I mean, imagine like a civilization stretching across 3 continents. Europe, Africa, Asia.
3 continents.
Yeah. It was this tapestry woven from diverse cultures and languages,
That's mind-boggling. I mean, 3 continents.
all held together by this one common thread, the Roman government.
I can only imagine the logistical challenges of governing such a vast and varied territory. Did they have some kind of secret sauce that allowed them to maintain control over such a sprawling empire?
Well, think of the Mediterranean Sea as like the heart of the Roman Empire.
Okay.
Pumping lifeblood through this complex network of arteries that connect its diverse territories.
Uh-huh.
It was the key to their communication, their trade, their military might.
So the Mediterranean wasn't just a geographical feature. It was like the very life force of the Roman Empire.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a brilliant insight. Now, I mean, when we compare the Roman Empire to other ancient empires, like, let's say, the Iranian Empire, were there any, striking differences in their approach to ruling such vast territories?
Oh, absolutely. The Iranian Empire, it was relatively homogenous, in terms of culture and language.
Okay.
But the Roman Empire, it was a melting pot, a true mosaic of cultures, each one with its own distinct identity, yet bound by the common system of government imposed by Rome.
That raises an important question. I mean, how did the Romans manage to keep such a diverse population under their control? Was it all about military might, or were there other, more subtle forms of power at play?
It was a bit of both, really. Roman power was a delicate balancing act, a dynamic interplay between the emperor, the aristocracy, and the army.
Okay, let's unpack this power triangle then.
Yeah.
We've got the emperor at the top, figurehead, the ultimate authority. Then we have the aristocracy, the wealthy, the landowning families who likely held a lot of sway in Roman society.
Yeah.
And finally, the army, the muscle, the force that ensured Roman dominance. So how did these 3 power centers interact and shape the political landscape of the empire?
Well, let's start with the emperor.
Okay.
The first emperor, Augustus, was a master strategist. He established a system called the Principate, which was all about appearances.
Appearances.
Yeah. He understood the importance of maintaining the image of a leading citizen rather than an absolute ruler. This was a shrewd political maneuver to help secure the support of the powerful Senate, the traditional governing body of Rome, which, as you mentioned, was largely composed of the aristocracy.
So it was all about maintaining a facade of shared power, even though the emperor ultimately held the reins.
Precisely.
Okay.
And then we have the Roman army, which, unlike many ancient armies, was a paid professional force.
Oh, wow.
This was a game changer. It meant that soldiers were loyal to the emperor who paid their wages rather than to individual generals or their home cities.
That makes sense. I mean, a professional army is a powerful tool for any ruler.
It is.
But I imagine keeping a large standing army happy, loyal, it could be quite a drain on the imperial treasury now.
You're absolutely right. The army was a double-edged sword.
Okay.
Backbone of Roman power, but also a potential source of instability.
Uh-huh.
If the emperor failed to keep the army satisfied, it could easily lead to mutiny,
Yeah.
which could spell disaster for his reign.
It sounds like the emperors had to walk a tightrope, balancing the interest of the aristocracy, the demands of the army, and their own ambitions.
Right.
Did this power dynamic shift over time, or did it remain relatively stable throughout the empire's history?
The balance of power, it was constantly in flux.
Okay.
But during the first 2 centuries of the Roman Empire, a period often referred to as the Pax Romana,
Pax Romana.
there was a remarkable degree of stability and peace.
Really?
Yeah, this era, it was marked by relative internal tranquility and a secure external frontier.
That's surprising. I mean, you think an empire built on conquest would be constantly at war.
You would, wouldn't you?
What were the factors that contributed to this period of peace and prosperity?
Well, Augustus, the first emperor, he played a key role. He understood that the empire he inherited, it was already vast. And, further expansion wasn't a top priority. His focus was on consolidating power, establishing firm controls over existing territories, and ushering in an era of stability.
Okay.
This period, it became known as the Augustan Age.
The Augustan Age.
Became synonymous with peace, prosperity, and cultural flourishing.
It sounds like a golden age for the Roman Empire.
It was.
But I'm guessing this period of peace didn't last forever.
Wow.
Were there any, like, rumblings of discontent or challenges to Roman rule during this time?
Even during Pax Romana, the empire, it wasn't entirely static. There was gradual expansion, primarily through absorbing these smaller kingdoms,
Okay.
particularly in the Near East. This expansion, however, it was more about consolidating borders, securing strategic territories rather than outright conquest.
I can imagine governing such a vast empire, even during a time of relative peace, must have been, well, a Herculean task.
It was.
How did the Romans manage to administer such a sprawling territory?
One of the keys to Roman success was their mastery of administration and their strategic use of urbanization.
Urbanization.
Cities, they became the nerve centers of the empire. They served as administrative hubs, facilitating tax collection, ensuring smooth governance of the surrounding areas.
So it was all about establishing this network of cities to exert control over the vast countryside.
Exactly. Roman cities, they weren't just centers of population and commerce. They were also centers of Romanization, spreading Roman culture, language, and law throughout the empire.
That's a brilliant strategy.
It was.
By establishing cities as centers of Roman influence, they were essentially weaving the fabric of the empire together. But did they rely solely on Roman officials to administer these far-flung territories? Or did they have other methods of ensuring local cooperation?
The Romans, they were masters of delegation and pragmatism.
Okay.
They cleverly co-opted local elites, integrating them into the imperial administration.
Huh.
These elites, often from the conquered territories, played a crucial role in collecting taxes and maintaining order in their respective regions.
So it wasn't just about brute force. The Romans understood the importance of building alliances.
Exactly.
Leveraging local knowledge and expertise, it sounds like a surprisingly sophisticated system of governance for an ancient empire. But was this reliance on local elites always a smooth and harmonious relationship?
As with any power-sharing arrangement, there were some inherent tensions. Over time, provincial elites, they grew in influence and wealth, sometimes even challenging the authority of the traditional Roman aristocracy.
Ah,
This shift in power dynamics would eventually have significant consequences for the empire.
it's fascinating to see how power dynamics evolved within the empire, even during a period of relative stability. But this Pax Romana, this era of peace and prosperity, couldn't last forever, could it?
No.
Were there any cracks beginning to appear in the foundation of Roman power?
The 3rd century CE marked a turning point for the Roman Empire. Internal and external pressures, they began to mount, threatening the stability that had defined the previous centuries.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
It does.
What kind of pressures were starting to emerge? Was it a case of internal strife, external threats, or a combination of both?
The Roman Empire, they faced challenges on multiple fronts. Like in the East, you had a new power emerging, the Sasanian dynasty in Iran,
Oh, wow.
posing a pretty formidable military threat. And then to the north,
Yeah.
Germanic tribes pressing against the empire's frontiers, testing Roman defenses.
So the Roman Empire was caught in a pincer movement, facing threats from both east and north.
That's right.
That must have put a tremendous strain on their resources and manpower. How did the Romans cope with these, mounting pressures?
Well, the simultaneous conflicts on multiple fronts stretched the Roman military thin.
Okay.
And, this strain on resources was compounded by internal political instability.
Ah, so problems at home as well.
The 3rd century CE, it saw a period of rapid turnover of emperors.
Okay.
25 emperors in just 47 years.
That's a staggering number of emperors in such a short period. I can only imagine the chaos and uncertainty that must have characterized Roman politics during this time.
You can imagine, yeah.
Did this instability at the top, did it trickle down and impact the lives of ordinary Romans?
Absolutely. Political instability, it often leads to economic uncertainty and social unrest. And the Roman Empire was no exception. But even amidst these tumultuous times, Roman society continued to evolve, adapting to the changing circumstances.
Let's delve into the lives of the people who lived, under the shadow of the Roman eagle. I'm curious to learn about their family structures, social norms, the cultural tapestry that made up Roman society.
Sure, Roman families, for instance, were quite distinct from other ancient societies.
Okay.
They placed a strong emphasis on the nuclear family, with adult sons typically establishing their own households independent of their parents. This differed from many other cultures where extended family units were more common.
That's a fascinating insight. It seems like the Romans had a very modern concept of family structure emphasizing individual independence.
They did, yeah.
Were there any other unique aspects of Roman family life that set them apart from their contemporaries?
Another interesting aspect was the inclusion of slaves as part of the family unit.
Really?
While this might seem jarring to our modern sensibilities, it's important to remember that slavery was an integral part of the ancient world, even with the rise of Christianity.
It's a stark reminder of how much societal values have shifted over time. Slavery, which was once commonplace, is now universally condemned.
Exactly.
But let's get back to the Roman family. You mentioned that women had a surprising degree of legal rights.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that? It seems counterintuitive given the patriarchal nature of most ancient societies.
Well, you're right. Roman society was undoubtedly patriarchal, but Roman women did possess certain legal rights,
Okay.
particularly when it came to property ownership and management. They could inherit property, buy and sell goods, and even run businesses.
Hmm.
This legal autonomy set them apart from women in many other ancient cultures.
So it was a complex picture for Roman women. They had some legal protections, but were still constrained by societal expectations and norms. It seems like there were contradictions and nuances within Roman society that, well, they challenge our simplistic assumptions about the past.
Absolutely. And speaking of contradictions, the Roman Empire, despite the spread of Latin as the language of administration and high culture, it was a remarkably diverse place.
Really?
It encompassed a tapestry of languages, religious practices, clothing styles, cuisines. Even social organization varied widely across the empire.
So despite the Romanization of many aspects of life, local customs and traditions persisted.
They did.
It wasn't a monolithic culture, but rather a rich and varied tapestry woven from the threads of many different cultures.
Exactly.
It's incredible to imagine the bustling marketplaces, the vibrant festivals, the daily interactions between people from all walks of life, from all corners of the empire.
The Roman world was indeed a dynamic and cosmopolitan place, and to understand the engine that powered this vast empire, well, we need to dive into the intricacies of their economy.
Let's get down to business. What were the key economic drivers of the Roman Empire? Was it primarily based on agriculture, trade, or perhaps a combination of both?
Trade was a major force. It wasn't just about luxury goods for the elite.
Uh-huh.
It was about the essential commodities that sustained the empire: grain, wine, olive oil, other staples.
So the Roman Empire had this vast trade network that crisscrossed the Mediterranean, bringing goods from the far reaches of the empire to its bustling city.
Exactly. And the Romans, they had an impressive infrastructure to support this trade. Harbors, roads, even granaries to store surplus grain.
Uh-huh.
And this infrastructure, it wasn't just about facilitating trade, it was also about projecting Roman power and control.
I've always been fascinated by Roman roads. I mean, they were marvels of engineering, built to last for centuries. They said that all roads lead to Rome. Were these roads primarily built for military purposes, or did they serve other functions as well?
While the Roman army certainly benefited from well-maintained roads, they also facilitated trade, communication, and the movement of people across the empire. Think of them as the arteries and veins of the Roman body politic, connecting the heart of the empire to its extremities.
That's a fantastic analogy. Now, getting back to trade, I've heard about these amphorae, ancient shipping containers that provide valuable insights into Roman trade patterns.
Right.
Can you tell us more about them?
Amphorae, they were essentially large ceramic jars used to transport goods, particularly liquids like wine and olive oil.
Okay.
What's amazing is that these amphorae, often discarded after use, have survived in vast numbers, providing archaeologists with a tangible record of Roman trade routes and the types of goods being transported.
It's like having a window into the past, being able to trace the flow of goods across the empire.
Yeah.
I bet those amphorae could tell some fascinating stories about Roman commerce, and the interconnectedness of their world. Did any particular trade routes or commodities stand out in terms of their importance to the Roman economy?
The grain trade, that was vital to the Roman Empire because it provided the staple food for its vast population.
Of course.
Regions like Egypt, North Africa, Sicily, known for their fertile lands, they became major breadbaskets for the empire.
So it was a delicate dance between supply and demand, ensuring that the cities were adequately fed.
Right.
Did the Romans have any, special mechanisms in place to manage this vital grain trade?
They implemented a system known as the annona. It was essentially a grain dole provided to the urban poor.
A grain dole.
Yeah, it was a way of ensuring social stability by keeping the masses content and preventing food riots.
It sounds like a precursor to modern welfare systems.
Yeah.
A way of redistributing wealth to prevent social unrest. But didn't the Romans also have a thriving agricultural sector within Italy itself?
They did, absolutely. While the grain trade was essential, particularly for supplying Rome itself, Roman agriculture was diverse and regionally specialized. Some areas, like Campania in Italy, known for their exceptional fertility, produced a surplus of grain, while others focused on other crops, like olives and grapes.
So it was a balanced system, with some regions specializing in certain crops and trading with others to meet their needs. It's fascinating to see how interconnected the different parts of the empire were, each playing a role in supporting the whole. But who was doing all the work to produce these agricultural goods and keep the Roman economy humming?
Well, slavery, unfortunately, was a deeply entrenched institution in the Roman world, and slaves, they formed a significant portion of the agricultural workforce,
Uh-huh.
particularly on large estates.
But I recall you mentioning that the use of slave labor wasn't uniform across all sectors of the economy. Were there any instances where free labor was preferred over slave labor?
You're right, the use of slave labor, it wasn't always the most economical choice.
Okay.
In certain industries like construction or mining, where the work was seasonal or particularly dangerous, free labor, despite its higher cost, was sometimes preferred.
So as a matter of economic calculation,
Right.
if the work was hazardous or intermittent, it made more sense to hire free laborers rather than invest in slaves who required year-round care and upkeep.
Exactly.
Were there any other factors that influenced the use of slave labor versus free labor?
The cost of maintaining slaves, that was a significant consideration for Roman landowners. They had to factor in the cost of food, clothing, shelter, medical care. In some cases, it was simply more cost-effective to hire free laborers, even if their wages were higher.
It seems like the Romans were quite pragmatic when it came to managing their labor force. Did they have any specific methods for organizing and controlling their workers, both slave and free?
The Roman agricultural writers,
Yeah.
essentially the management consultants of their day, they devoted a lot of attention to the issue of labor management. They developed these strategies to maximize output, minimize downtime, ensure that workers were adequately supervised.
That's fascinating. I'm curious to hear about some of the specific methods they employed. It's like getting a glimpse into the ancient world of human resource management.
For example, Columella,
Uh-huh.
a first-century writer from Spain,
Okay.
he stressed the importance of having a surplus of tools and equipment on hand. To prevent delays caused by broken tools. He understood that lost labor time was more costly than the expense of extra tools.
That's a smart strategy. Minimize downtime, maximize output. It seems like the Romans had a keen understanding of efficiency and productivity. Did they have any other, innovative management techniques?
They also understood the importance of supervision.
Okay.
Columella believed that workers were more productive in smaller groups because it was easier to keep an eye on everyone and ensure that they were working diligently.
So a bit of micromanagement going on.
You could say that.
I guess some things never change.
Yeah, they didn't call it that back then, but the principle was the same, and they also used work gangs to organize labor. Although Pliny the Elder, another Roman writer, he criticized this practice because it often involved chaining workers together. He considered it inhumane.
That's a stark reminder that the Roman world, for all its advancements, was still a place of brutal inequality. The lives of slaves and the working poor were undoubtedly harsh,
They were,
despite the efforts of some enlightened thinkers to improve it a lot.
indeed. The gap between the wealthy elite and the lower classes, it was vast.
Uh-huh.
To illustrate this disparity, one early 5th century writer claimed that some of the richest Roman families had annual incomes of up to 4,000 pounds of gold.
4,000 pounds of gold. That's an astounding amount of wealth. It's hard to even fathom the lifestyle that kind of wealth would afford. Were there any significant economic shifts or changes during this period that might have contributed to this wealth disparity?
The Roman monetary system, it underwent a major transformation during this era. The silver mines in Spain, which had been a major source of wealth for the empire, they became exhausted,
Okay.
forcing the government to abandon its silver-based currency.
So what did they do? Did they simply switch to a different metal, or was there a more complex solution?
Emperor Constantine, he introduced a new gold-based currency, the solidus, which proved to be a remarkable success.
Okay.
It remained in circulation for centuries and became a symbol of Roman economic stability.
So a gold rush for the Roman elite. But all this wealth and power, it didn't prevent the empire from facing serious challenges, did it?
Not at all. In fact, the later centuries of the Roman Empire, they were a time of profound transformation, both culturally and politically.
Uh-huh.
It's a period historians often refer to as late antiquity.
Late antiquity.
Yeah,
That sounds intriguing.
it is.
What defines this period, and why is it significant in the grand narrative of the Roman Empire?
Late antiquity, it spans roughly from the 4th to the 7th centuries CE. It marks a period of transition and transformation. It's not simply about the decline and fall of the Roman Empire.
Uh-huh.
It's about a fundamental reshaping of the Roman world.
So it's not just a story of collapse, but also a story of adaptation and change.
Exactly. And one of the key figures who initiated this process of transformation,
Yeah.
Emperor Diocletian, he recognized that the empire had become too large and unwieldy to manage effectively.
Okay.
So he made the bold decision to downsize,
Downsize.
abandoning territories that were deemed strategically or economically unimportant, and focusing on consolidating the empire's core territories.
A strategic retreat.
You could say that.
Sometimes you have to take a step back to move forward. It sounds like Diocletian was a pragmatist, willing to make tough choices to ensure the empire's survival. Were there any other notable reforms or changes that he implemented?
Diocletian was a reformer at heart. He reorganized the empire's provincial boundaries, created smaller, more manageable administrative units. He also separated civilian from military functions, giving more power to military commanders in the provinces.
So he was streamlining the administration, decentralizing power, and strengthening the military. It sounds like he was laying the groundwork for a more resilient and adaptable empire.
He was.
Did these reforms achieve their intended goals?
Well,
Did they succeed in stabilizing the empire?
Diocletian's reforms, they did help to stabilize the empire in the short term, but they also set in motion a series of changes that would have long-lasting consequences.
Such as?
His decision to strengthen the military. Well, it would eventually lead to the rise of powerful military commanders who would challenge the authority of the emperor.
It's a classic case of unintended consequences. Diocletian's efforts to shore up the empire inadvertently paved the way for new challenges to Roman authority. Were there any other major figures who shaped the course of late antiquity?
Emperor Constantine, who came to power after Diocletian, he built on these reforms and added his own innovations. He introduced a new gold coin, the solidus,
Oh, right, yeah.
which we mentioned earlier, and he established a second capital at Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul.
2 capitals.
Yeah,
That's a bold move. What was the rationale behind establishing a second capital in the East?
Constantinople, it was strategically located at the crossroads of Europe and Asia,
Uh-huh.
making it an ideal center for trade and defense. It also helped to shift the empire's center of gravity eastward, closer to its vital eastern provinces and trade routes.
It sounds like a shrewd strategic decision. Did this shift eastward have any cultural or religious implications?
Constantine's decision to establish a second capital in the east, well, it coincided with a period of significant religious change. He himself converted to Christianity,
Okay.
and under his rule, Christianity went from being a persecuted sect to the favored religion of the empire.
So a major religious and political shift happening simultaneously. That's a lot of change for an empire to absorb in a relatively short period of time. Did these changes contribute to the fragmentation of the empire, or did they help to hold it together?
It's a complex question,
Yeah.
and historians continue to debate the precise impact of these transformations. But we can certainly say that the later Roman Empire was a time of both continuity and change.
Uh-huh.
While the western half of the empire, it eventually fragmented into smaller kingdoms ruled by dramatic groups, the eastern half, centered in Constantinople, endured for centuries.
So a tale of 2 empires. The West succumbing to external pressures and internal divisions. The East adapting and surviving. It's a reminder that the story of the Roman Empire isn't a simple narrative of decline and fall. It's a more nuanced, multifaceted story of transformation, resilience, and adaptation. But there's one more major event that we need to address in this sweeping saga of the Roman world.
What's that?
The rise of Islam.
Ah, yes, the rise of Islam in the 7th century CE. That was a truly seismic event that would have profound and lasting consequences for the Roman world and beyond.
It's often described as a turning point in world history. What were the factors that contributed to the emergence of this new force, and how did it impact the Roman world?
Well, the rise of Islam in the 7th century CE, it really was a game changer.
It was, yeah. It reshaped the political and cultural landscape of the Mediterranean world and beyond. But before we dive into that, I'm curious about the sources historians use to piece together this intricate story of the Roman Empire. I mean, it's like this vast and complex puzzle, isn't it?
It is.
Where do they find the pieces to reconstruct this ancient world?
Well, historians are like detectives, piecing together clues from a variety of sources. Each one offers a unique glimpse into the Roman past. And these sources, they can broadly be categorized as texts, documents, and material remains.
Okay, let's break that down. What exactly do you mean by texts? Are we talking about like ancient scrolls and manuscripts?
Exactly. Texts, they include historical accounts written by contemporaries, often called annals because they were structured year by year, chronicling the major events of each year. We also have texts like letters, speeches, sermons, legal codes, philosophical treatises, and even poems and plays.
Wow.
These written works provide invaluable insights into Roman thought, culture, and politics.
It's amazing that any of these fragile documents have survived for centuries. I can only imagine the painstaking work that goes into deciphering and interpreting these ancient texts.
It is painstaking, but it's a testament to the meticulous work of scribes, librarians, and archivists who carefully preserved these treasures for posterity. Without their efforts, our understanding of the Roman world would be significantly impoverished.
Now, you also mentioned documents as a source of historical information. How are those different from texts?
Documents are more everyday records.
Okay.
Think inscriptions carved into stone and papyri, which were essentially the paper of the ancient world. Inscriptions, they're often found on monuments, public buildings, even tombstones. They offer glimpses into a wide range of topics, from the achievements of emperors to the lives of ordinary people.
It's like finding ancient graffiti or billboards offering these snapshots of daily life, social customs, even religious beliefs.
Exactly.
And what about papyri? I know those were made from a plant that grew on the Nile River, but what kind of information do they contain?
Papyri are a treasure trove of information about the Roman world. The dry climate of Egypt preserved thousands of these documents, ranging from personal letters and contracts to official records, even shopping lists.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like reading someone's mail from centuries ago.
It is. It gives us this really intimate glimpse into their lives, their hopes, their fears, their daily routines. It's really remarkable.
It must be fascinating to delve into these personal archives, getting a glimpse into the everyday lives of people who lived under the Roman eagle. It's like eavesdropping on history. Now, we've talked about texts and documents, but you also mentioned material remains as a source. What are some examples of material remains, and how do they help us understand the Roman past?
Material remains are the physical objects left behind by past cultures.
Okay.
The buildings, monuments, pottery, coins, tools, weapons, artwork, even the food scraps and human remains that archaeologists painstakingly unearth, they all tell a story.
So it's not just about deciphering written records, it's also about digging up the past and analyzing the stuff people left behind.
Exactly.
It's like a giant three-dimensional puzzle.
Archaeologists are like detectives, carefully excavating sites, meticulously documenting their findings, and analyzing the artifacts to reconstruct the past.
I bet it's an incredibly exciting, albeit challenging field of study. Imagine uncovering a Roman villa, a bustling marketplace, or a soldier's helmet. These tangible remnants of the past, they must bring history to life in a way that written sources simply can't.
You're absolutely right. Holding a Roman coin in your hand, for example, or walking through the ruins of a Roman bathhouse, it connects you to the past in this visceral way. It allows you to imagine the people who lived, worked, and played in those spaces.
So historians use this multifaceted approach, drawing on texts, documents, and material remains, to weave together this richer, more nuanced understanding of the Roman world. It's like creating a tapestry,
It is.
with each thread representing a different piece of evidence that contributes to the overall picture.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that each type of source has its own strengths and limitations. Texts, for example, they can provide vivid narratives and insights into Roman thought, but they can also be biased, reflecting the author's own perspective and agenda.
So it's essential to read between the lines, to consider the context in which these texts were written,
Yes.
and to critically evaluate the author's motivations.
Exactly. And documents. Well, while they can provide fascinating details about daily life, they might only offer a partial or fragmented view of the past.
It's like trying to understand a complex novel by only reading a few scattered pages. You might get a sense of the characters and plot, but you'll miss out on the nuances and the bigger picture.
That's a great analogy. And materials remains, while tangible and often evocative, they can also be challenging to interpret. Archaeologists need to carefully analyze these objects within their historical context to understand their significance and meaning.
So it's a constant process of discovery, interpretation, and reinterpretation. As new evidence emerges and new technologies become available, our understanding of the Roman past continues to evolve. History is a living, breathing subject, not a static collection of facts.
Beautifully put, it's an ongoing conversation, a dynamic dialogue between the past and the present.
Now let's circle back to the rise of Islam, which we touched upon earlier. It's often seen as a turning point in world history, marking a shift in power dynamics and the emergence of a new cultural force. Can you tell us more about the early days of Islam and its impact on the Roman world?
Islam emerged in the 7th century CE in the Arabian Peninsula, with a man named Muhammad at its center. He preached a message of monotheism, emphasizing submission to the will of God, Allah.
So, like Christianity, which was already gaining ground in the Roman Empire, Islam was a monotheistic religion, challenging the traditional polytheistic beliefs of the time.
Exactly. And Muhammad's message, it resonated with the people of Arabia, uniting disparate tribes under this common faith. Within a few decades, the Islamic State had unified the Arabian Peninsula, setting the stage for a remarkable period of expansion.
That's incredibly fast. What were the key factors that contributed to this rapid unification and expansion?
Well, the message of Islam itself, it was powerful and appealing, offering a clear set of beliefs and practices. The Arabian tribes, often fragmented and at odds with each other, they found a unifying force in Islam. And the Islamic armies, they were highly motivated, well-led, and skilled in desert warfare.
So it was a perfect storm of religious zeal, political unity, and military prowess. How did the Byzantine Empire, the eastern half of the Roman world, react to this rising power on its doorstep?
The Byzantines, already weakened by conflicts with the Sasanians in Persia, they saw the Islamic conquest as a serious threat. They fought valiantly to defend their territories, but the Islamic armies proved unstoppable.
I imagine these conquests must have sent shockwaves through the Byzantine world. How did these conquests reshape the political and cultural landscape of the region?
Well, within a few decades, Islamic forces had conquered vast swaths of the Byzantine Empire, including Egypt, Syria, and Palestine, dealing a significant blow to Byzantine power and prestige. These conquests, they also brought about profound cultural changes, as Islamic art, architecture, and learning began to influence the conquered territories.
So it was a period of both conflict and cultural exchange, with the Islamic world and the Byzantine world interacting and influencing each other. Did the Byzantine Empire ever recover from these losses? Or did the rise of Islam mark a permanent decline in Byzantine power?
The Byzantine Empire, though diminished, it proved to be resilient and adaptable.
Okay.
They would continue to exist for centuries, playing a vital role in preserving classical knowledge and shaping the course of history. However, the rise of Islam fundamentally shifted the balance of power in the region, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in world history.
It's amazing to think how the ripples of these events, set in motion centuries ago, continue to shape our world today. The Roman Empire, with its triumphs and tragedies, its innovations and injustices, its enduring legacy and its dramatic demise, it offers this fascinating case study in the rise and fall of civilizations. And the rise of Islam, challenging old empires and forging new paths. It reminds us that history is a dynamic and ever-evolving process.
Well said. The Roman Empire and the rise of Islam are just two chapters in the grand narrative of human history. And as we delve into these chapters, we gain insights not only into the past, but also into the present and the future.
I couldn't agree more. Our deep dive into the Roman Empire has been a journey of discovery, uncovering the complexities, the contradictions, and the enduring legacies of this ancient superpower. And as we've seen, history is not just about memorizing names and dates. It's about understanding the forces that have shaped our world, the choices that people made, and the consequences of those choices.
Exactly. It's about connecting the past to the present, drawing lessons from history, and using those lessons to navigate the challenges of our own time.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the Roman Empire. I hope our listeners have enjoyed this journey through time and come away with a deeper appreciation for the fascinating and often messy story of human civilization.
It's been a pleasure exploring the Roman world with you and our listeners. And until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.